Hello, hello, and happy new year, and welcome to 2023's first installation of Huddle Up with the Fun Coach. I am Mark Duncan. I am the Fun Coach. It is great to be with you today live. Would love if you are watching this live to certainly drop a note in the chat so that I know you can hear me and I know that you're here. It's great to be here. I love this time of year as a fundraising professional, right? We spend so much time sprinting and stressing, especially in the last quarter of the fiscal year, if your fiscal year is a calendar fiscal year. So in October, November, December, we're looking at our numbers. We're hoping we can meet our fundraising goals, and then we get into crunch time in December, and then of course the holidays, um, can interrupt momentum. But at the end of the day, hopefully by December 31st, you have raised what you needed to raise, and that you can take a well deserved and well earned sigh of relief as you enter into this new year. But with a new year comes new goals, new uh, metrics. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And some of you that may be watching this either live or on the replay, perhaps your fiscal year is a July to June fiscal year, and so this could be something that you could be thinking about as you get to June and July, or it's something you could be looking at midstream. Probably best if your fiscal year is a January to December to really be looking at your goals and so forth. And so, as we move into this year, and we're already here, right? There are things that we should be thinking about in terms of goals. So there's organizational goals, there are programmatic goals, and there are dollar goals, revenue goals, expense goals. But inside those revenue goals are fundraising goals, right? And so, what are your fundraising goals for this year? How much do you need to raise as you begin this new fiscal year? But it's not just about the dollar amount, because there are metrics that you should be tracking to ensure that you are being successful as it relates to prior year or prior years. So it is early enough in the fiscal year on this 12th day, if your fiscal year is a calendar year, to be looking at these metrics. So I'm going to talk about metrics that you should be following as a standard. First and foremost, which I know you all follow, is the dollar raised goal, right? How much you need to raise and that you're tracking that throughout the year. That's critical because that revenue is crucial to you running your mission. The second is goals related to number of visits. So you should be setting a goal for how many actual visits that you want to make this year. Whether you are the executive director, CEO, director of development, you should have a goal for getting out in front of your donors and having individual conversations with them throughout the year. So, what's that number, right? So, I often say that a CEO or a uh, an executive director probably shouldn't manage a portfolio more than 30, 40, maybe 50 tops, right? In terms of managing those relationships, which means you're going to want to get in front of all of those folks at least once, if not more, throughout the fiscal year. So how do you manage that? What does that look like on a monthly basis? What months are going to be more difficult to get visits? Usually July and August are probably the most difficult to get visits because of vacations and so forth. But you should be tracking, setting a goal for the number of visits that you want to make, not just per year, not just per month, but per week. So, typical number of visits that you should be trying to make per week with a full portfolio is somewhere in the 3 to 5 range. Okay. 3 to 5 visits a week. Now, I'm when I count visits, I'm not counting people, I'm counting visits. So you could be working on a gift or a solicitation with someone that could require a number of visits to get to that ask, right? So it's about activity, right? This is about activity, but you should be setting a goal for the number of visits that you want to make this year. The second is number of gifts, not just the amount of money that you want to raise, but what's the number of gifts that you want to generate? Again, look back at your prior year or prior years and see what your number of gifts that you've received, number of donations that you've received, and challenge yourself to exceed that. Okay. So you got to set a baseline. This is the perfect time to set baselines if you've never done this before. So if you can look back at your last fiscal year and see what you did, even though you didn't track it, you should be able to go back, obviously, how much money you've raised, and hopefully you're able to go back and look at the number of visits that you've actually had. And you should be tracking those. So it's one thing to go out on a visit and bring a gift to closure. But if you aren't tracking those visits and what happens on those visits in your CRM, then you're actually doing yourself and your organization a disservice. Um, and I say that because, yes, you could probably say, well, it's not important. I remember everything that happened on that visit. It's not that important that I track it, but it's important to the organization. It's important to the person who follows you, right? You may move on to another organization and someone will assume your portfolio. And so you want them to be able to pick up where you left off. Okay. So make sure that you're tracking those visits. Okay. And then, of course, number of gifts. So, how many gifts did you generate this fiscal year, this past fiscal year? How many gifts? What were the number? And if you know that, what are you going to do to exceed that number? Okay. The other metric that you want to make sure that you are tracking is your donor retention. So, what is donor retention? Those are people that gave in prior year and then gave again in the current fiscal year. So, if you go back 2 fiscal years now and look at the percentage of donors who gave last year and then gave again in the last fiscal year. So, if your fiscal years are calendar fiscal years, if you go back to fiscal 21, and then those people that gave in fiscal 21, what percentage of those people did you retain in fiscal 22? What's that percentage? Now, benchmark for that, what you should be shooting for is somewhere in the 45% range. That's an industry sort of standard. If you have a donor retention rate of 45% or more, you're doing very, very well. If it's significantly lower than that, then there's work that you need to do to be able to retain those donors. So, I think that having these metrics established and that your whole team is focusing on them so that you understand that these are indicators of success for your organization. Okay. And then finally, and I had to look at my notes, my apologies here. Uh, finally, two more I want to add. So, average gift size, right? So, what's the average gift size? You can go back at prior fiscal years and take do the math to figure out what your average gift size is. If you had some significantly large gifts, particularly that were like your three biggest gifts that are not typical in terms of size, pull those out, right? And then do your average gift size, and that will give you a more accurate goal to shoot for. And then finally, number of new donors. So, how many new donors did you get last year and in prior years? And how many new donors do you want to get going forward? Okay. So, let's repeat that list. Okay. Um, Dollars raised, you want to obviously measure your dollars that you want to raise as you're starting your fiscal year, number of visits that you're going to make. And that's for each person in your organization that is managing a portfolio. Okay. So if you are the executive director and you have a portfolio, then you should have a goal for the number of visits that you're going to make. If you're the development director and you're managing a portfolio, then there is a number of visits that you want to make. And if there's anybody else in the organization that has the responsibility of relationship management, relationship fundraising, there should be a goal for a number of visits that you want to make. Second or third, rather, is the number of gifts. So you want to set a goal for the number of gifts that you want to generate this year. Average gift size, what's that average gift size that you already have? Sometimes an average gift size could be $100, $150, or maybe in the low, 40s or 50s. That's kind of normal, particularly if you're doing a lot of mass solicitation efforts through direct mail, social media, and so forth. But as you begin to do this work in terms of generating significant gifts from your high net worth prospects and donors, then we want to see that average gift size go up. Number of new donors, you want to set a goal for number of new donors, and then how many of those donors are you going to retain? So a donor retention number. And again, that industry standard for donor retention is about 45%. So these metrics, and there are, I believe, a total of six of them. So dollars raised, number of visits, number of gifts, average gift size, number of new donors, and donor retention. These are metrics you should be tracking every single year, every single month, right? And every single week, right? These um, metrics are going to be what measures your success, right? And if you're focused on these metrics, then there will be, I think, little that will take you off track. So if you're sidelined by uh, things that pop up that are not related to getting you to these goals, then you've got to take a pause and look at whether or not you should be doing those things. I often say, and this is primarily for executive directors and CEOs of nonprofit organizations, you should be doing only the things that only you can do. And everything else should be delegated to those on your staff, paid or volunteer, to be able to execute those things that you shouldn't be doing or that others can do. So when I say only be doing the things that only you can do, there are only things that the executive director and the CEO or director of development can or should be doing. If there are things outside of that that actually somebody else could be doing, pause and see if you can delegate that so that you can get back on track and stay focused on only the things that you can do. Okay. So, I hope you all are having a very, very wonderful beginning of 2023. If this is the beginning of a new fiscal year, I hope that you follow my suggestion and start tracking these six key metrics as you begin this fiscal year and start setting goals for yourself. Even if you don't set a goal and you just start tracking them this year, that would be good, especially if you're a new organization. Start tracking this information because that becomes your baseline for future fiscal years. Okay. So, if anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. You can certainly watch this. If you're watching this on a replay, feel free to add your questions in the comments and I will certainly circle back. I hope you're having a great beginning of your fiscal year and a great beginning of 2023. And as always, all of this work that we do to generate the revenue that we generate is really not about the dollars. It's always about what the dollars do for the people that we serve. Thanks.